The meeting of the Justice, Health, and Welfare Committee will come to order. The purpose of the meeting is to review the report and findings of the outside investigations of the St. Louis County Police Department. The committee takes official notice of and admits into evidence all St. Louis County ordinances and resolutions. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Gray.
Here.
Councilmember Days.
Here.
Councilmember Clancy.
Here.
Okay. Well, just before we get started, I did want to say I appreciate this review of the police department coming out, and the report is very enlightening. I have a lot more comments throughout the meeting and afterwards, but primarily I would like to say this is going on for a long time. This is not recent. The findings that they brought to our attention about, and everyone knows one of my issues has been the racial divide within the police department, not only within, but with the community as well, but that was not addressed in this report. We don't have time to go, of course, through the report page by page, and I'm sure most of you have not had the opportunity to thoroughly review the report, but hopefully you have had a chance to get the main points. And of course, the news article that came out was pretty accurate from my standpoint. I've also talked to a couple of people about the report. So point being, I would just like for everyone, we'll go through each category as listed on the agenda. And if council members can give their, if they have any comments or reactions to that particular section, you can make those at that time. So with that, I would like to begin with the racial divide in the police department. And if there's anyone who would like to comment on that section.
Madam Chair?
No. Oh, yes, Councilwoman Day.
Okay. Well, and I, again, have not had the opportunity to thoroughly review this. It was kind of scanned a little bit. But I guess I'm looking at much of what is in the report. It really is not new information. I think you intimated that earlier. We have had a significant racial divide from the top on down, and we have not addressed that. So I guess my point is that basically what's in this report we already know, and my concern is what is the next step when we're dealing with either or all of these issues. So that's basically where I am with this. We've talked about it. We have, I guess things were so bad that we had to get a separate ESOP. And so that tells me there that there's significant challenges in this area. So my question is, what do we do past this point? Much of the information that they've gleaned here is basically things that we already know. So that's my point. What is the next step? So that's just on point A. Thank you.
Great. And I hope someone from the police department is listening. We did invite Chief Barton to attend today, but she declined she had reasons for her not being able to attend today, but I would hope that she has someone listening in and hear our comments. Anyone else? I would like to add. Oops. So is there anyone else or just hear paper rattling?
Yeah, I was going to make some comments, Councilwoman. Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with Councilwoman Days that there is There are some findings in here that seem to be part of a common understanding within our community about the St. Louis County Police Department. However, what I do appreciate about this report is that they do appear to get into a little bit more specific and granular level about some of the policies within the St. Louis County Police Department that other reports simply didn't. Perhaps maybe the Department of Justice review from 5 years ago did, but that it has been 5 years. The Ferguson Commission took on more of this at a higher level. So I think that I encourage everyone to take their time reading this thoroughly over the next few weeks and pay specific attention to some of the specific and more granular findings that they have. I don't think it would be prudent for us to cut right to next steps and what do we do about it without having the thorough understanding that they of what the report actually says. And I don't think anyone's advocating for that necessarily, but I think this is a lengthy report. There's a lot of details, and I also have not had time to take a thorough review. I plan to do it over the next few weeks. And I also, importantly, really encourage the community to pick up this report and read it for themselves, because I hope that we are able to have another meeting the first week of January where we can hear more from the community about their reactions to this, and potentially also hear from someone who can speak more to us about the findings of the report and the methodology. But one of my big takeaways was that these are long-standing issues. Chief Barton is definitely in the hot seat now as the current lead of the St. Louis County Police Department, but the issues that they have noted, again, that builds on previous reports, is that this goes back several decades under several chiefs. And so, you know, there's a lot to consider, and we can't move forward in the ways that we need to without having a full understanding of this. So I appreciate what this report adds to the body of knowledge, the growing body of knowledge about the challenges that exist in the St. Louis County Police Department.
Madam Chair, you're on mute.
Yes, Councilman Fitch, and prior to you getting back in, where we are going, we're not discussing page by page or line by line, but we are asking for your comments or your reaction to the various categories that's listed on the agenda. And at this point, we are discussing the racial divide.
Okay, so all we're speaking about right now at this moment for this meeting is the racial divide?
No, sir.
Okay.
At this moment, we're speaking about racial divide. If you look at the agenda, it delineates what categories we would discuss. So we're going according to the agenda, and at this point, it's the racial divide. If you had any comments or reactions to that part of the...
And I do, and basically I got to hear most of Councilwoman Clancy's comments, and I will tell you that I did read the report, all 43 pages end to end. This is one of the things I do. I've done probably more of these kind of assessments of police departments, more than 50 in this country, including NYPD, including Chicago. And I will tell you that I can tell you that most of what I see in here, I agree with, by the way. They're good suggestions. They're very good suggestions. I don't disagree with a lot of the recommendations they have in there. One of the things that's sorely lacking, and this is in all categories, is what's the cost? What's the cost of doing all of these recommendations, short-term and long-term recommendations? I will tell you, based on everything I've seen in the report, it's going to be probably 10 million plus to do that. Are we prepared as a council? And if you want to talk about going back decades, I assume that you do, because I heard Councilwoman Clancy say decades, previous chiefs, obviously, which I am included. And I will say guilty as charged. But most of the issues have been through the decades is funding. It's about funding. It's about paying for all of the things that they recommend in here. And consistently through the years, every chief that I ever worked for since 1983 were consistently said and told by this council and our predecessors and county executives, we don't have the money to do this. We don't have the money to hire all these additional personnel that it's going to take to do these things. Now, with that said, there's some low-hanging fruit here, and I'm happy to help and happy to point out, because I think of everyone on this council, I'm probably the only one that's a police consultant and a police expert. Has been recognized that in the courts. I can certainly help us through that, but be prepared for the bill at the end of this of what it's going to cost to do many of these things. And I am certainly open to that if the council is open to that. And I would hope that we will hear from Chief Barton at some point of what those costs that she sees and the police board sees as being necessary to do many of these things. The communications part, which is a big part. Oh, I'm sorry, we're going to get into that in a little bit. But the communications part is a big part of the racial component as well. A lot of that can be done without funds. A lot of that can just be done with opening the dialogue. And certainly that needs to happen as well. And let me know when we're going to talk about the other parts, because I know you said right now we're just talking about the racial divide.
Correct. And I don't disagree that the budget implication is significant in some aspects, but when I look at what they talk about in the area of racial divide, I don't see where an extensive amount of money will be required to do things such as with the hiring, the promotions, the assignments, and training. Those are things that you can inherently correct by being more objective than subjective. It may take, I guess, what you're saying is someone to train the staff on how to do that, maybe. But they do have an HR office, and I think we have someone over in St. Louis County who probably could help them with those things.
I agree with you, and it's what I said. Exactly what I said. There's some low-hanging fruit here that will not cost a lot of money to do. That I think are great suggestions by this group. It's just a matter of identifying those, how you're going to go about. Are you going to have to hire a consultant to come in, look at your policies, all of those type of issues, which all will cost money at some point. Just to say, you know what, we have the staff, they could figure it out. Obviously, if that was the case, they would have already figured it out to some extent. I could tell you that the staff, especially the civilian staff in the police department, through the years, has been reduced significantly. I was there when we laid people off, civilian staff who could do this kind of work. So we have to commit as a council to give them the tools that they need to do these things instead of just being the ones to stand back and criticize them for not doing it.
Madam Chair.
They've requested training. I've requested additional training. I've been told that they have training. So do they have training? This is not a question for you. This is just because we're giving our opinions right now. If you have the training, bias training, cultural competency training, sensitivity training, then a lot of those things would have addressed these issues. So again, these are all of our comments and reactions. We're not asking for someone to explain it, but that's my opinion on that situation. Yes, Councilwoman Days.
Well, I think I want to go back a little bit, because when we talk about this, we add this to the number of reports that's been mentioned earlier that have been addressing the same thing. We have gone through the Ferguson initiative. We've gone through that report. Where is that report? What was implementation from that? We've done the DOJ report that sits on the shelf. What have we done with that? So, I recognize that we're going to have some funding behind some of these issues, but some of this is just absolutely, as you mentioned, Councilwoman Fitch, this is low-hanging fruit. Sometimes we just have to do the right thing. Change is difficult, and what's going on now seems to be working for some. And so that's where I am. It takes a concerted effort. It really takes a willingness to change some of the behaviors that we have. And so I just don't want this, again, whoever paid for it, really doesn't matter, that we're sitting here with another report that we're going to go through, and it will sit on the shelf, a lack of willingness to do what is required or asked for in this report. So thank you.
Madam Chair, if I could add to that.
Let
me check with a couple of the council people first, real quick. Councilman Harder, Councilman Tracus.
Thank you. report. I also started reading the City of St. Louis and their report, which is out as well. A lot of the same things are in both reports, especially dealing with the racial divide. So it's in both areas. The city seems to be more diverse than the county, but they still have the same problems from what I read into the reports. I think there is some low-hanging fruit here, as Councilman Fitch talked about, things that could be done in the next couple of months, but then there's also some long-term issues here, and there is a cost associated with it. So I would agree with that side of it. I guess the thing that struck me by reading this is that there was no discussion on any of the good things that have happened in the last couple of years and the things that have been implemented and the money spent both on body cameras, two-man cars, equipment, training, overtime. You know, it's out of control overtime because of all the training that's required in recruiting. So there was no mention of any of that. It's almost like we've not done anything, and that's not fair either. There's been a lot of things done. Is there things that could be done? Sure, there always are. So we need to be focused on that too, and be more proactive and solution-based as we move through this report. That's my observation off the bat.
Councilman Tracus, any comments?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I really don't have much to add other than what's been said. I will say that I was encouraged to some extent in the report with a clear reference to the strong ethical foundation they found within the department. That's consistent with what I've seen, and I think it bodes well for implementation of any recommendations. Seems to me that the rank and file here overall have been viewed by at least these examiners as having a strong ethical foundation. So I think we have an opportunity going forward. And the only other observation I would make is that, as has already been stated, these problems are long-standing. And we have a new police chief, and she has an opportunity to lead the department forward through this. And I look forward to working with her as she begins to try to implement some of these recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Clancy.
Yeah, I heard a little bit of contradiction in what Councilman Fitch said. At one point, I heard him say that there's low-hanging fruit, and then at one point, I heard him say that, you know, if this were easy, why hasn't it happened before? So I look forward to hearing more specifically about where Councilman Fitch sees the low-hanging fruit. I also want to echo Councilman Tracus's sentiments that I did see some positives during my skim through this that the report points out regarding some of the professionalism and the foundation of the St. Louis County Police Department, and I think there's some opportunities to build off from there. And I also welcome the opportunity to partner with the police department, including the chief and her leadership cabinet, and the St. Louis County Police Commission, who I think plays has the opportunity to also play a leadership role in doing some of the thorough policy review that is needed and that the report points out. I am one of those people that tends to be very sick of the reports because our region does really well a job of studying, reporting, and putting things on a shelf. However, I also think that we have a huge opportunity through this. This report adds to the current body of growing knowledge in our community about the challenges that that exist in our county police department and how that impacts public safety at every level of our community. And let's embrace the opportunity that this brings. This council has the opportunity to help provide some answers just as much as we have the opportunity to continue to ask questions. So I hope we can all have a continuing discussion about this. And I know Councilwoman Gray that you wanted specific comments about this section on racism, and we've kind of given you some more global feedback. So I apologize for that, but I very much see today's meeting as the first step in a series of ongoing conversations about this report. When it does come to the section that you wanted us to chat through specifically right now, Councilwoman Gray, again, I haven't had the opportunity to read this thoroughly yet, but one thing, and this connects to the resources conversation that Councilman Fitch raised, one thing that strikes me is we had established, the St. Louis County Police Department earlier this year had established a unit or a special office on diversity and inclusion. And unfortunately, it appears that they've never been budgeted to get to outcomes and results in the way that we need them to. So that's an issue that I want to raise that's connected to this section and to resources. And that we also need to make sure that office, while it may take a leadership position when it comes to working through diversity and inclusion issues, is also equipping everyone in the police department to build their capacity when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And essential to that is making sure that this diversity office within the St. Louis County Police Department has the staff, experience, and knowledge that they need on this issue.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Councilman Fitch.
There's no contradiction, Councilwoman Clancy. What I'm pointing out is there's low-hanging fruit and there's things that will take resources. That could both be true. One doesn't contradict the other. So don't misunderstand what I'm saying. One of the things I will tell you, and this is actually a fairly short report on an assessment of a police department this size. That's only 43 pages. I've done them that's over 80 pages. And I will tell you that what these consultants do, what I do as a consultant, is I develop a utopia police department. This is everything that a wonderful, modern, progressive police department would do. And by the way, if you would ask any of these consultants, and I hope we have an opportunity to talk to them about this, here's what I would ask them. Of everything that you have in this report, recommendations-wise, long-term and short-term, are you aware of any police department in this country that does all of these things? I guarantee you they will say they don't exist. So understand that when you read a consultant's report. This is a perfect world. I heard mentioned earlier about the collaborative reform agreement by the Department of Justice. St. Louis County never went through the consent decree process. Some have that confused with Ferguson. What the county agreed to do is go through a collaborative reform agreement with the Department of Justice. And by the way, the conclusions made in there, it was never resolved because the Department of Justice walked away from that report. They walked away from it. It was never concluded. And you could blame that on the Trump administration and Attorney General Sessions because they ended that program. I expect to see that fire back up under the new administration. And some of the other things I will tell you about this consultant report is there's some just plain wrong information.
Councilman Fitch, where are you focusing still on racial divide?
If you let me finish my sentence, I'm going to read. Inequity, it says, also extends to gender. So the fact that the county still uses the term patrolman is indicative of an agency steeped in tradition which effectively ostracizes employees. The county police have not used the term patrolman the entire time I worked there from 1983 forward. So they've got some bad information in the report as well. That's one example that needs to be addressed. And then they flip back and forth in the report and they talk about the Central Patrol Division. That's the city police department. They have a Central Patrol Division. The county does not. So we have to address some of those issues that are in there, which tells me that the consultants, after they wrote the report, did not go back to the department and say, let's talk about this report. Let us get your input, because many of these things could have been corrected before they wrote the report. That's my criticism of the report overall. And what I will tell you is hopefully we'll have an opportunity to talk with these individuals to get to some of these topics.
Okay, we'll move on to the next subject, which is crime reduction strategies.
And I have comments there as well.
We're going to move to another person, another committee person. Councilwoman Days or Councilwoman Fitch?
That was me.
I mean Councilwoman Clancy or Councilwoman Days.
I have nothing specific on this one. It's basically generic information. So thank you.
Yes, Councilwoman Clancy.
Yeah, I think what is in this section is pretty jarring. They basically say that there is no unified or cohesive crime control strategy in St. Louis County, and that should be concerning for all of us. That's my quick takeaway from the skim that I was able to do. And I think calls into question a lot of the fundamentals of this department.
Yes, and I forgot to give my comments. I did see where it said that the city and county police chiefs don't communicate with one another. Especially they talked about the areas where we border city and county, and I also saw that in the paper, where they need to do more to work together, and that could possibly reduce crime. And there needs to be a crime reduction strategy. It says for the past decade or more, there has not been a crime reduction strategy. So those are some things I think need to be addressed. Of course, everything else as well, but those are the few that I would like to point out.
Yes,
Oh,
Councilman Gray, can I add something really quick on that too?
Yes.
I also want to acknowledge that I don't know, I think there's a lot of conditions within the St. Louis region that make it very hard to have a cohesive region-wide or even county-wide strategy, given the fragmented nature of our region. But that's also how it is right now, and we need to figure out ways to bridge that fragmentation so that we can have a common vision and a cohesive strategy. So there might be some short-term and longer-term goals associated with that.
Yes, and one of the other things I didn't mention was the coordinated effort to address crime. That is one of the other things that was mentioned, and again, communication is an issue, and with the city and county police chiefs, but crime is big, and it's a major issue, especially like they said along those areas like Jennings, that city county border, and that is primarily in my district and Councilwoman Day's district even much more so. But that is why those are of major concern to us. Councilman Fitch.
And this is, I talked about low-hanging fruit. This is one of the low-hanging fruit. They mentioned in there a program called CompStat. Did you remember reading that in there? A program called CompStat about crime reduction. So CompStat started at NYPD. So when I did the assessment of the NYPD, I went to their CompStat meetings and I watched what they did. I brought it back as the police chief, and we were doing CompStat meeting. Unbeknownst to me, I didn't know that those ended after I left. So they suggest that we go back. Well, they didn't say go back. They said we need to implement CompStat meetings again, crime reduction strategy meetings. I absolutely agree with that. I didn't know that had ended. Apparently did after I left. But to say that we've never had a centralized countywide crime fighting strategy is not accurate. Maybe in the recent past that may be true. I would go to the city CompStat meetings. They would come to the county CompStat meetings. I talked to Sam Dotson and Dan Isom, not every day, but almost every day when they were the police chiefs in the city. I can't speak for what happened after that. That would be a Chief Belmar question and Chief Barton question. But that's some of the low-hanging fruit that I agree with that could be easily reinstituted. Here's another thing, and since you mentioned it, Councilwoman Gray, you talked about
Fitch, I want to make sure that we're not, cause I know I didn't bring up your name and no one else so far. So we're not trying to place blame right now. We want to just,
I understand that.
We want your comment.
That's what I'm trying to do, but you keep interrupting me.
But you keep bringing up the past.
Well, no, that's because Councilwoman Clancy brought it up.
We just want your, well, we didn't say, okay.
You said this has been going on for decades. Who's she talking about?
Right, but we didn't say anything about CompStat and all those things. And
it says in the report, we're talking about crime fighting.
Then, but they're not doing it now. We just want your reaction and how we can move on.
Well, I keep trying to do that, but you keep interrupting me. So I was going to
Well,
tell you,
you're
it's Councilwoman Days,
taking up a lot of time, so
and you're. I
if
didn't know
you,
were we being timed?
yes,
Okay, so I want to address
we have a council meeting
why
today.
there's fragmentation that Councilwoman Clancy brought up. We have no control over what the Berkeley Police Department does in St. Louis County government or the Bell Ridge Police Department. We can suggest that they participate in crime fighting strategies, but at the end of the day, most of those districts, your district, Councilwoman Days, are municipal police forces. Councilwoman Clancy, they're municipal police forces. You have very little unincorporated areas that you have to deal with, except for maybe the Afton area for Councilwoman Clancy. You can control the crime fighting strategies there. So to say that this is all a St. Louis County issue isn't accurate, and she is exactly right, Councilwoman Clancy, that it does have something to do with the fragmentation. That is absolutely true. That's all I have.
Anyone else?
Well, Madam Chair, I guess when you look at the overall picture, when you're looking at strategies, one of the, and we keep using the term low-hanging fruit, is to incorporate perhaps those who have less or fewer resources for their departments. I know you are probably aware that Senate Bill 5 will be coming into play very shortly. I think it's after the first of the year. And that is going to probably weigh in on some even more of our resources from the county being absorbed by some of these municipalities. So when you're looking at the strategies, again, we might consider, or I don't know if they did consider a strategy meeting with the municipalities that have areas such as yours and mine, that we have the bulk, I guess, of the crime, and looking at reducing it in those areas. So that might be something that that we could incorporate here. I didn't see that there in terms of a relationship with the munis, but that's clearly one of the sore spots that we're going to have to deal with. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. No other comments. We'll move on to tools and technology. Anyone have any comments about tools and technology?
I do.
And I would like to add, again, this is probably a major budget issue, and we do have to be, as mentioned before, responsible with the budget. But the technology has not been updated for over, what, I think 20 years, maybe 15, 20 years. But I do think that we do need to take into account the public budget implication that we can have on this area more so than anywhere else. That's my comment.
Thank you. I do have a comment there.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
You're exactly right. This is budget related. I couldn't agree more. Most of everything that they have in there technology-wise has been asked for in the past and declined because of budget reasons. You see a mention of RMS, that's a record management system. You see mention there of CAD, computer-aided dispatch. Those are all becoming obsolete, and they're all multi-million-dollar replacements. So just we have to be prepared for that. But again, that's not low-hanging fruit, but it is absolutely a valid criticism.
Anyone else? Community engagement and public information. Any comments? I did see that one of the things that was mentioned is that the current chief needs to speak to the community more often to try to establish some type of connection with the community, and also to be more accessible. And hearing from her, she's the face of the police department, and we think that, the thought is that she should do more in that area of public press and such.
I do.
That's the biggest thing.
Oh, Councilman Gray.
Go ahead.
I do think that, I'm not sure if they speak to this specifically, but I do think that our current police commission has taken some beginning steps to try to get out into the community a little bit more. And so I want to acknowledge that. I very much appreciated that they have done a couple of nighttime meetings that have been framed as, you know, town halls and community engagement sessions. So I would love to see more of that. And I think it's been well received by the community. And while I also think that it appears there's opportunities for the chief to get out more, there are lots of officers that are in the community every day that are, you know, trying to develop positive relationships with young people and others. And I want to acknowledge them too. It does seem to be happening in pockets, and perhaps there's opportunities to build from.
Anyone else comment?
Yes, ma'am.
Go ahead.
I would agree with everything Councilwoman Clancy said. That's exactly right. There's always more the chief can do, always, especially during COVID. So many people have been cooped up in their offices or in their homes, not being able to get out and have community town hall meetings. All of those things came into play, as you noticed in the report, where they specifically mentioned those are absolutely barriers to effective communication. So I would hope that later into 2021, some of those barriers start coming down, and the department absolutely in the past has been engaged with the community, maybe not to the extent they'd like to be, but it goes back to staffing in many respects, and there could always be more done. So she's exactly right. And the police board to go out into the community and have those town hall meetings they did during the chief selection process was unheard of in the past. So they have certainly made steps in the right direction, and I agree with all of them.
Anyone else before I move on?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
they also recommend some kind of a resident advisory board of some kind here, which I think would be, again, I don't think that costs much money.
Councilwoman
Yes.
Days, you cut off for just a second, and I missed probably something that was important. Can you start?
Okay.
The screen froze for a second.
Okay, in the report, they mentioned a resident advisory group or council or something like that.
We didn't hear that
and
part.
I think that would be helpful moving forward. Any opportunity that you have to give the face or a different face to the community, I think is well worth it. Again, I don't think that costs much money to be visible. Sure, we have, COVID, but, even before COVID, we did not necessarily have, I guess, the kind of outreach, particularly in my community, that was a positive outreach. And so I think that is one of the recommendations I think I read there. So I think that would be very good for us to see if immediately we can handle something like that, or we can implement something like that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Harder, I think you said you had something.
Yeah, just kind of, working in the community is the best, I think, the most beneficial and probably the most efficient way of fighting crime. Getting out, knowing the community, knowing where the bad guys are and the good guys are, understanding what's going on in our schools, with students and what's happening there through the SRO program, being able to communicate properly to communities in all age groups and all racial makeups. That will be probably the greatest crime fighting tool that you could put together when it comes to that. And I've seen this happen in the municipal areas. Some do it better than others. And where everybody knows their beat cop or their area cop, the response time is quicker. People have a personal stake in that crime fighting initiative. The people help out, neighborhood watch, and so on. There's a lot of good things that can come out of that relationship, but the cop has to get out of their car. The cop has to talk to people. They have to be known in that area by the people in that area, both the good guys and the bad guys, and so that they can all work to make a better community overall. And I've seen this happen and seen it work in a lot of the municipalities, and I think it still it works with St. Louis County. It's just the county is so big that it's hard to focus on one area or another when there's so many different parts of the county, geographically, racially, economically divided, and so we've got to do a better job of putting that relationship together.
Councilman Tracus, did you have anything to say?
No, thank you.
Thank you. The last category, and then we can revisit racial divide, because I think most people still had a lot to say, but if not, that's fine as well. Update on police department policies. Any comments? Yes.
It's a good
Councilman
idea
Fitch.
it's a good idea to update police department policies. I can't disagree with that.
Yes.
Perhaps you can tell us, Councilman Fitch, why they weren't updated under your tenure.
Actually, they were. If you look at the report, all of the most recent use of force.
What the report says is that.
You want me to answer you or not?
The discipline policy wasn't updated since 2007, and your use of force policy hasn't been updated for at least 2010 anyway.
2010 is when I updated it. That happened on my watch. In 2007, you have to keep in mind that if there are changes, a lot of the policies that we have in place, I can't answer why they weren't updated after I left. So if you want to blame me for the use of force policy not being updated since 2010, I was the one that updated it in 2010. 2007, I was not the police chief then. And if there were no new modern updates during those next few years, per the standards that are issued by the 4 major police organizations, there would be no reason to update it. But I will tell you this, there's no reason why they should not be updated every 3 to 5 years, depending on what's going on. If there's absolutely no changes, they should at least be updated because there's a new police chief, because the orders are signed by the police chief. So they should be updated whenever there is a new chief. They should go through all of the orders and update every one of them with the new chief's signature, so the department is aware that the new chief supports this policy. Maybe there's changes to it or not, but they should be updated.
Isn't it CALEA recommendations and standards that, for instance, use of force policy be reviewed and updated annually, or at least regularly?
Reviewed. If there need to be changes because the standards change. By the way, I'm a CALEA team leader.
That's why I asked the question.
I just finished doing a CALEA assessment of the Georgia Bureau of Investigation last week. If there are standard changes because the standards have been updated, yes, you absolutely have to go in to update your policy. But if there are no standard changes, there's no need to update your policy to say there's no changes. I'm going to update my policy with no changes.
Are there records of these reviews when they're done internally within a department, say on an annual basis? Are there records that are kept?
Yes, sir. You track all the changes that are made. Yes.
So we'd be able to access those records through the police department?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Anyone else? I would like to point out that they, regarding policies, they pointed out that the EEO complaints are not invested properly. And of course, use of force policy needs to be addressed. And I have filed a resolution that's been on the agenda, I think, for 3 weeks, maybe now. So I filed that when I was in the legislature. I think that the use of force policy needs to be not only updated, but adequately defined when use of force is appropriate. And it has been utilized much more often than we think it should be, especially in the situations where people have been killed and there was no gun on the other part of the person who was killed. So use of force, I think, is a major issue. The policy is a major issue, in St. Louis County and other places, of course, that I think needs to be addressed. And hopefully the new commission will look at it as well as the new leadership over in the police department. Lots of failures on that issue of police policy, but people can read them. I would like to say that the momentum for reform is now that they have this. Again, people say we've had these things discussed in the past, but never any action. And I hope that we can see some action this time and some concrete solutions to these problems, because we cannot continue as a community on this train that we're on right now.
Madam Chair?
I was going to say, looks like you have a comment.
Yep. You ready? So since you're speaking of policy, one of the policies that they suggested be updated, and I agree, is the use of force. However, one of their suggestions is that the use of force policy should be updated to absolutely prohibit shooting at a moving vehicle. That's also changed, so they're wrong in that respect. That's changed. That changed after the vehicle attacks in Europe and in the United States, where individuals, terrorists, for the most part, have used vehicles to run over people. If you have a policy, think of Nice, France, the box truck that killed over 80 people. If you have a vehicle running over individuals, your only choice may be to shoot at that vehicle. You're not shooting at the vehicle, you're shooting at the driver of the vehicle. To shoot at the driver of the vehicle to stop that attack. So to say there should be a policy that there are no instances when you should ever shoot at a vehicle, that has also changed and morphed since the vehicle attacks we've seen in this country. So I was a little disappointed that they did not bring that up in their request to change the use of force policy. Most agencies will say you can't just routinely shoot at a moving vehicle, but if you have no other options, like the Nice, France attack, you have to be able to shoot at that driver to stop that vehicle.
Anyone else? We have a little time. Did anyone want to have any other comments about something we've already addressed? Diane?
Chair.
Oh, well, Lisa, I saw Lisa and she's on the committee, so I'll let her go first and then we'll move to you, Councilman Tracus.
I'm not sure where you want this comment, but I have comments about sort of where we move forward from here. Would you like me to wait until later in the agenda, Councilman Gray, or share them now?
Share now, please.
Yes, I would like to see this committee take this issue back up in the first week of January. By then, the full committee and other council members will have had the opportunity to have a thorough read or reread of this report. By then, also the community will also have a chance to have had a thorough read of this report and perhaps offer some commentary of their own about what's in here and what's not in here. And I'm very interested to hear what the community members have to say about this, because we've heard a lot from the community over the past couple of years on this issue. And so I think another meeting would be in order the first week of January. I also would like to find someone who could come and speak about the report's findings, perhaps someone that played a key role in this report from Teneo. It appears that Mr. Charles Ramsey took the lead on the report in the city, so I don't know that he would be the correct representative, but I believe there is someone else who is similar to Mr. Ramsey, Mr. Oates, who might be able to come and share with us more about the findings and methodology, because I would really like the opportunity to engage with these folks about this report.
Thank you. Anyone else? Oh, Councilman Tracus, I told you. Oh, just to be fair, since Councilman Tracus asked to speak, even though I usually let the committee go first, I told him he would go.
I'll wait. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Councilwoman Days.
Yes, I thought that perhaps this would happen in this meeting, that we would have someone to come and kind of talk about how they got to put the information in this report. But I do think that is extremely important now. And again, I think that the chief, as well as the police commissioner, whoever that is the chair of that, I think they also should be invited or participate in this process. So I would look forward to doing that and having that done as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Tracus.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to sort of reiterate what Councilwoman Clancy's already hit on, that I do think it's important that this committee reconvene when all the members have an opportunity to have really thoroughly gone through the report and crystallize their concerns, their questions, etc. I commend Councilman Fitch for going through the report. It is a dense 45-page report that requires a considerable amount of time. And so I agree. I think that this should be the beginning, certainly not the end, and that hopefully we can get the police chief, perhaps members of the police commission, to appear and respond to questions. I think that's important. The other thing I wanted to point out, we didn't touch much on, and I think this is, again, something that should be dealt with intensely in subsequent meetings, and that's this concept or this suggestion of a essentially coordinated or collaborative policing effort. I want to hear more about that. I want to hear exactly what the intent and the end game is with respect to that before I can sign on for that. So those are just a couple of things I wanted to mention before we closed out today. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Councilman Fitch.
Thank you. Again, I go back to what I said at the beginning. I think it's a good report. There's a lot of good information in there the department can absolutely use and make improvements. One of the things I would suggest, though, since we're talking about who do we want to come back and talk with us, Dan Oates, the former police chief of Miami Beach and in Colorado, Aurora, Colorado, know him well. He was the lead consultant on this case. He has run CALEA accredited departments before. Chief Ramsey is not. So I would suggest that we get him back in. And I'd also suggest that we have, at the very least, the lieutenant colonel who is in charge of this report in the police department, Troy Doyle, have him participate as well, since the county executive put him in charge of this report, to have him be here to be able to answer some of the questions that we have, since he ran the project for the police department.
Councilman Harder.
Yeah, I would echo that, and I would say any on this topic needs to have a minimum of the police chief there, a representative of the police commission, Mr. Oates, and Officer Doyle, Commander Doyle, in this as well. If we're going to at least get a full look at this whole process before we start implementing any of this, we need to find out exactly how this was put together, why they looked at certain things and why they didn't look at certain things. And we can only get that information from the people on the inside before we jump to any conclusions. So that's my recommendation for whatever the next meeting will look like in the coming months.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I would also like to add that we need to take whatever time is necessary to do this. I feel that sometimes our meetings are rushed. We have, things to do. And if we have to have a series of meetings, I think we should be committed to doing that as well. So thank you.
Anyone else with comments? Diane, public comments?
Yes, ma'am. One this afternoon or
Yes.
this morning, still the morning. Our comment is from Tom Sullivan. Today's meeting of the Justice, Health, and Welfare Committee should not have been held with such short notice and dealing with a report of considerable size that few have had the opportunity to read and digest. Clearly, this was an effort to exclude the public as much as possible. I look forward to having a new council chair next year that does a much better job of scheduling and providing for public input. Madam Chair, that's all the comments for today.
Okay, of course, the meeting was scheduled when we had the information, we couldn't have scheduled it had any timely notice, but the committee, because we didn't know the exact date when the report would come out. But there's always time for future meetings, and the public can comment at that time. So I take issue with that last statement. Oops, my computer went out. Anyone with any final comments prior to it or adjourning? I do like to, no one has any final comment. You do? Anyone? I see you take your thing out.
I was going
Well,
to make a motion to adjourn.
I would like to just reiterate what I said in the beginning. These have been long-standing issues with the St. Louis County Department. No policy updates in the last 15 to 20 years. The racial divide has
Not
been
accurate.
ongoing for a long, very few policy updates in the last 15 to 20 years. The racial divide has been a long, ongoing, long-standing issue that needs to be addressed. And I've often asked that the police department focus on these matters, as I mentioned earlier. I want a deep look into the racial divide in the police department. I've talked to police officers who are very, very concerned about their work environment. Um, this review is a much needed wake up call, and I do hope that the current chief will make this a priority and do something about the issues, especially again, my passion is this racial issue divide within the department. I hope that she works on amending that and take this as an opportunity for progress. And again, I appreciate the conversations we had today. Again, I appreciate the report and the findings, but we don't want it to stop here, as was mentioned earlier. And with that, I entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. Thank you. And the meeting is adjourned. Oh, all in support?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any opposed? Thank you all. Have a great day. We'll see you in about an hour.